All right, it looks like our drag and drop was successful. I've refreshed the functions, and we do have these two new functions from dragging and dropping them into our Storage Explorer. The delete from QAzure and sendExpired to QAzure. Let's just go ahead and take a look at this one. SendExpired to QAzure. I do want to point out that this one does have an extra file in it. It's moment.min.js. Essentially what this is it's just a JavaScript library that helps you to manipulate date times. I have it used up here to create an instance of a moment date, today's date, and then as you can see, it's easy to subtract days from that by just doing this up here. So what I do is I just get, what this function does is it asks the table storage for items that are older than 7 days, and then once we have that, we'll send it to the queue for deletion. So we get the 7 days before, and then we create the query string to filter the timestamp from the table of items or notes that are less than 7 days before. This builds the REST query, and then once we get the response back, what we do is we push all of the response items into this queue load array, and then once we've looped through, we push them to the queue through this actual binding. So there are two things that we're going to need to set up to make this work. First of all, the endpoint for this query is different than the other two functions. So what we've done is we've created a variable for it. It's table storage query path. And so let's just go in there and set that up. As I mentioned, you can just type that in here, but I have it stored in the application settings. So we've got the table storage host, which is right here, and then the table storage path. I'm going to add this one, table storage query path. It's pretty similar, except it's just got these parentheses at the end. And so I could have just appended it in the code, but I'm just going to add it here and save that. All right, so that sets up our REST call to our table storage. Next thing we need to do is set up the binding so that it's actually binded to our queue, so I can push to the queue. So once that's loaded up, I'll just show you you can go in here and change it in here. Obviously your storage account isn't going to work, so we're just going to go to integrate over here, outputs. It's going to output to the queue storage, and I just need to select the storage account, which is this one here. This is a parameter that's referenced in the code, and then the queue that we're writing to is a queue that we created called sendExpiredToQueueAzure. So I'm going to save that. Another thing too is this function is different than the other functions because it's actually triggered on a timer. These two functions that we created earlier are triggered by HTTP calls, and this one's actually triggered to fire every day. You can set it up to fire at specific times for the day. For our example, it really doesn't matter. I just wanted to delete anything that's older than 7 days. So that should have set up that binding, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to run this test. Another thing too is I created this video more than 7 days after the other videos when we did create these other notes. So I am getting items back. If you are just doing this on the same day and you created notes in the application here, you shouldn't get anything back because it's not more than 7 days. But what you can do is change this to 1 day or 7 seconds or 7 minutes, whatever you want to do, and it should return those items that are older than what you specify. So it looks like we got these items back. To check that it actually reached our queue, we can just go to our storage account here and go to queues and select the queue that we created, sendExpiredToQueueAzure, And as you can see, we have items in our queue here. I just like to use the Storage Explorer to do that. So I'm going to go to ExpiredToQueueAzure here, and let's just refresh this, and as you can see, the items are here. So essentially what our function does is it goes to this, it does a REST call to the table storage here, and it looks for timestamps that are older than 7 days. It gets those row keys and it puts it into this storage queue here. Let's take a look again at our sequence diagram. So we just ran through this sendExpiredToQueue. We essentially have our items in the queue storage. The next thing we need to do is actually write a function that's going to delete the nodes from the queue storage, and that's this delete from queue. And this one's actually going to get triggered anytime an item gets added to the queue storage. So let's take a look at that.